warm welcome to the world today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. Ukraine's former defense minister Mikhailo Fedorov calls for elections in what is seen as Volodymyr Zelensky's biggest challenge. Israeli army confirms it opened fire on a vehicle carrying a 5-year-old Hind Rajab in Gaza. Flash floods tear through communities in Thailand's northern Nan province, swallowing houses and cutting major roads. Let's begin the world today. A major political challenge is emerging in Ukraine after former defense minister Mikhailo Fedorov called for presidential elections despite ongoing war with Russia. The former minister says democracy cannot be held hostage by Russia and has called for a safe and legal way to restore the electoral process. Ukraine has been under martial law since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, suspending elections. Mr. Fedorov was sacked as defense minister last month, sparking protests in Kyiv. But his call for elections has divided opinions, with some politicians warning it could weaken Ukraine's unity during the war. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the parliament has approved Yevhen Khamara as the country's new defense minister amidst protesters gathered outside the parliament building, demanding the return of his predecessor Mikhailo Fedorov. Defense Minister Khamara secured 312 votes after being nominated by President Volodymyr Zelensky. Outside, however, demonstrators waved Ukrainian flags and called for the former minister's reinstatement, praising his push for military technology and defense reforms. Let's head on now to the Middle East, where Israeli military engineers say they've sealed 2 underground tunnel routes stretching about 2 kilometers beneath central and southern Gaza. The Israeli Defense Forces released footage of troops moving through narrow passages before pumping concrete into the tunnels, which it says belong to Hamas. The operation was carried out east of the so-called Yellow Line under the current ceasefire framework. However, rights groups have raised concerns that sealing the tunnels beneath populated areas could damage water, sewage, and other infrastructure. The claims have not been independently verified. And after over 5 weeks of relative calm in the UAE, the country's defense system on Tuesday detected missiles from Iran. An official statement says one of the missiles fell in territorial waters, the other fell outside the country. The attack came shortly after state news agency WAM reported a phone call between President Trump and his UAE counterpart. Our correspondent in the United Arab Emirates, Mayowa Adegoke, has more.
Suspended all trade and financial transactions with Iran in light of the regional escalation that has undermined regional and international peace and security. The statement, released Wednesday morning, comes hours after the Ministry of Defense detected 2 ballistic missiles from Iran late Tuesday evening. For the first time in over 5 weeks, residents across the country received emergency alerts at about 6:54 p.m. local time, warning them of potential missile activity. The Ministry of Defense says those missiles were targeting maritime navigation. It also released a video showcasing UAE Air Force and defense systems in action, describing them as capable of responding with utmost resolve to protect the country's security and stability. Tuesday's attack puts a dent in the over 5-week period of calm the UAE has enjoyed, which has strengthened confidence among both residents and visitors. Likewise, the impact of the war on the job market, which has witnessed severe retrenchment, had begun to soften with the return of business.
A lot of people actually lost their job, Some industries were still in business. We're still in business, despite the fact that some international flights were not coming into the country. And currently, it's picking up. To be fair, it's picking up. It's better than 3 months ago or 4 months ago. Hotels are being reopened. Restaurants are picking up again because the flight from Emirates, Fly Dubai are already like picking up, and they're increasing the number of flights that depart out from Dubai and number of flights that are coming into the country. So business is getting back to normal.
With the collapse of negotiations between Iran and the United States, the regional conflict remains. However, the Dubai government is doing everything to encourage international tourists, including its latest initiative, a Dubai Invite, which rewards residents for inviting friends and family to spend summer holidays in the city. From Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Maya Wadeguki for Channels Television News.
The Israeli military has confirmed for the first time its forces opened fire on a vehicle carrying 5-year-old Hind Rajab and 6 family members in Gaza City in January of 2024. Hind survived the initial attack but was later found dead alongside relatives. 2 paramedics sent to rescue her were also killed after their ambulance came under fire. The Israeli Defense Forces has now ordered a criminal investigation citing alleged failures in coordinating the ambulance movement. The case drew international condemnation after recordings of Hind pleading for help were released. Checking in on the weather in Europe, massive flames have ripped through hillsides in western Spain, forcing hundreds of people to flee as fast-moving wildfire engulfs the Las Herdas area. Around 700 people have been evacuated from 10 communities, while another 40 have been moved from a disability care center. More than 200 firefighters and emergency personnel, backed by 26 aircraft and military units, are battling the blaze. The fire comes as Spain faces one of its most severe wildfire seasons, with nearly 276,000 hectares already burned this year. Meanwhile, a massive fire has ripped through a petroleum products complex in northern Iraq, injuring around 30 people and sending flames through the Tangro area of Sulaimania Governorate. Firefighters eventually brought the blaze under control, with officials saying some of the fuel was saved. Residents, however, say the fire highlights wider concerns about pollution and the proximity of refineries to homes. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Authorities have begun an investigation. For cooling things down, with flash floods in Thailand's northern Nan province, swamping homes, washing away a bridge and cutting major roads. More than 110 millimeters of rain fell overnight in parts of Pua district, sending rivers surging through villages. Three major highway routes have been declared impassable, while landslides blocked other roads and a bridge linking Pua with Doi Pu Ka National Park, which was washed away. Authorities urged residents in vulnerable areas to move to higher ground, with heavier rain forecast expected through August 21st, raising fears of further flooding and landslides. Some of Europe's most important rivers are looking a lot different than usual. Water levels on the Rhine, the Po, and parts of the Danube River have fallen sharply, creating challenges for shipping, agriculture, and industry. And as the summer goes on, the situation is becoming more severe, with water levels continuing to drop in some areas. It's also raising bigger questions about drought and Europe's changing climate. For more on this now, let's cross over to Thomas Sparrow, correspondent with our partners, DW, in Berlin. Thomas, great to see you, as always. What are you seeing there, and how unusual are these low water levels?
It is quite extraordinary what we're seeing here in some of Europe's biggest and most important rivers. Just imagine the Rhine, which is Germany's longest, one of Germany's most important rivers. And in parts of that, cargo ships can no longer transit and people can go from one side of the river to the next in parts where you would otherwise have a lot of water. So it's obviously a matter that is causing a lot of concern. And it's not only the Rhine, it's also the Danube, another very significant river in Europe. It's the Po in Italy. So rivers that normally play a very significant role in Europe's economies, also in the ecosystems, are now being affected by these very long, dry summers. It is something that is a matter of concern, obviously, for people who deal with the ecology, who deal with ecosystems, but also who deal with the economy, because having rivers that are running dry, where the water levels are not what they're supposed to be, that has a major impact on the economy in this part of the world. So what you're seeing is certainly a situation that is a matter of concern. Experts, however, have stressed that this is not something definitely unusual. It is something that European leaders and European populations should actually start to get used to, because Europe is seeing drier and drier summers. Europe is seeing seasons that are more intense, that are lasting longer, that are starting earlier. So having dry rivers is something that European authorities will have to deal with also in the medium to long term.
Right, and who's feeling the impacts the most right now?
Obviously, the ecosystems, underwater ecosystems, are particularly affected. Farmers as well that are affected by the drought, by this very dry summer in parts of Europe, including obviously Germany. Then the different companies that normally transport their goods, their raw materials, for example, via these very important waterways. We're talking here about oil, about other materials as well. So they are particularly affected. They have had to shift some of their transport to road transport or rail freight transport as well, and that's why there have been meetings also with authorities to help that transition, let's say, from the waterways to other transportation methods. And then there's the potential economic impact, because important organizations here in Germany have stressed that if this is something that lasts a long time, if the major waterways are dry for a lengthy period, then that will have a very significant impact on the German economy, a German economy that, by the way, is already under stress, that hasn't grown a lot in the last few years, that is affected also in terms of infrastructure, in terms of productivity. So it is not good news for economists. It's not good news also for the German government as they try to improve Germany's economy.
Thomas, before you go, how are authorities dealing with the situation?
Especially with a mixture of immediate measures and also medium to long-term measures. The immediate measures are trying to help the communities that are mostly affected, also the organizations that are mostly affected. So if you are talking about these shipping companies, the authorities working with these shipping companies to ensure that they can transport their goods. As I stressed, these waterways are particularly important, not only in Germany, but also to connect different European countries. So when we're looking at the Rhine, when we're looking at the Danube, they are not only significant for one country, but for several countries. And as such, this is turning into a European-wide phenomenon, which also requires European-wide answers. And this is why also experts are stressing that this is something that has to be focused on for a medium to long-term approach. So also thinking about building ships that could navigate through lower waters, so that could be also possible when there is a drought or a very dry season. Also making some of the riverbeds deeper. This is something that is very controversial from an economic perspective, also from an ecological perspective. And then there's the discussion about obviously prevention and making sure that communities can be more resilient when these kinds of situations come. It's not an easy challenge, it's not an easy phenomenon, but it's one that, at least from a European perspective, needs to be tackled now and needs to be tackled also in the coming years.
Thomas, thanks again for bringing this to our notice and for the reporting as well. We're off on a break now on The World Today. Still ahead. Hanoi baker is turning Vietnam's traditional art of to hee, that's rice dough figurines, into elaborate edible flower art. Stay with us. Welcome back. Parents in the United States who say their children were harmed by social media have gathered outside an Oakland courthouse as Meta goes on trial over allegations of Facebook and Instagram put engagement ahead of young users' safety. 29 American states accuse Meta of using features like infinite scrolling and recommendation algorithms to keep children hooked while allegedly collecting children's data without proper consent. The states are seeking penalties that could reach over $1.4 trillion. Meta denies the allegations and says its platforms do not directly cause poor adolescent mental health, pointing to safety measures already in place. The trial is expected to last up to 8 weeks.
I'm here today because my daughter should still be alive. Anna Lee was 18 years old. She was a rural Colorado farm girl. She loved her family, her God, her horses, and every four-legged creature she could haul into our farm. But behind my daughter, we knew and loved, she was fighting a battle we could not see, a battle within the world of social media. Inside those journals, I found my daughter's pain, and I want to read one entry so people understand the impacts of the design of these platforms and how they impact little girls like my daughter. Anna Lee wrote, "Tonight has been one of the worst nights I've had in a while. I was sitting on my bathroom floor telling myself how much I hate myself. Nobody is going to love me unless I look the part. I look at other girls' profiles and it makes me feel worse. Nobody will love somebody as ugly and broken as me." And we continue to learn about Anna Lee's social media experience and how devastating it was. We learned that according to Meta whistleblower Sarah Wynne Williams, Meta targeted ads at teenage girls when they showed signs of being in a vulnerable emotional state and when they felt worthless, insecure, or like a failure. Advertisers were allegedly giving access to our children so beauty ads could be delivered at the very moments these girls were at their most vulnerable. Let that sink in. When my daughter was struggling, it became Meta's bottom line.
Spain's migration crisis is putting growing pressure on public and police services in the North African enclave of Ceuta as security unions demand more resources and stronger action. Police and civil guard representatives met with the opposition People's Party, warning that thousands of migrants remain in the city following the mass arrivals from Morocco in July. Unions say officers are overstretched and some are facing difficult working conditions and violent incidents. They're calling for stronger cooperation with Morocco to speed up returns and ease the pressure. The Spanish government says it is reinforcing security, public services and temporary accommodation as the situation continues. South Africa's Consul General to Lagos, Professor Bobby Moreau, has defended his country's immigration policies towards foreign nationals in the country. Speaking at the special roundtable at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Professor Moreau highlighted the discrimination by Africa and the rest of the world in labeling South Africa a xenophobic country because of recent attacks on foreigners, while ignoring inhumane treatment of migrants, especially Africans, in other parts of the world. The conference chamber of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs is venue for this all-important conversation on xenophobic attacks in South Africa. And the man in the hot seat is the South African Consul General, Professor Bobby Moreau, who has honored this invitation. Setting the tone for the discussions, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Shola Enikolai, speaking via Zoom, calls out what he terms Afrophobic attacks in South Africa, saying one can be patriotic without hating other countries.
Patriotism says, I love my country. Xenophobia and Afrophobia say, I must hate yours in order to love mine. The first can build nations, The second ultimately destroys societies.
When he gets up to speak, the South African Consul General wastes no time acknowledging Nigeria's help during the periods of struggle to independence. He then denounces the term xenophobia, which he says has become synonymous with South Africa, despite worst experiences happening elsewhere in the world.
Investigations by IOM, the UN and international media have documented African migrants being held in detention centers, sold in slave markets, beaten and exploited.
Professor Moreau takes the time to highlight South Africa's largesse towards foreigners.
If we were really xenophobic, we would not write everyone in our constitution.
Summing up the conversation outside the conference chamber, the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs refers to internal xenophobia, which has snowballed into the present-day situation in South Africa.
The history of black-on-black violence, is not one that you would forget in a hurry. So I think that this is an African problem now.
The discussion became even more honest after a while here at the chamber of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, as research fellows and analysts became even more suggestive of opinions that could help resolve the issue between both countries. At the end of the day, they decided this has to be joint efforts. At the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs here in Lagos, Amarachi Ubani, Channels Television News. Yes, it is a flower, and yes, it is edible. A Hanoi baker is giving Vietnam's traditional rice dough art a new twist, turning mooncakes into elaborate edible flower arrangements. Ahead of the Mid-Autumn Festival, artisan Nguyen Duong and her team craft mooncake vases topped with hand-shaped lotus, lily, and banana flowers. The creations stand up to 60 centimeters tall, with every delicate petal individually rolled out, cut and assembled. The technique took more than 3 months to perfect, with bakers battling cracks and collapses in shapes during the baking. Now, the stunning creations are drawing attention online, with some viewers initially mistaking the edible displays for real flowers. Yep. Well, you really could have fooled me into thinking that was a real flower. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.